Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at a pair of gloves that I took advantage of successfully in season, I think it was 4, and honestly they're really nice gloves, and they've been beefed up even further in season 5, and we're going to be going over the new versions of these in 1.5.0, which are pretty interesting. Wow, it looks like there's a ghost on the side of my screen. It's probably a blob of sunlight, I would assume. Yes, blobs of sunlight everywhere. Blobs of sunlight everywhere. Well, that didn't really work, but it looks kind of cool there in the background, like a little ghost. I'm going to leave him there. I got a little ghost on my green screen. So back to the video. The Flameweaver gloves are some pretty amazing gloves that have 7 to 9% increased attack speed on them. They also have 31.5 to 45% increased firewall size on them now, which they did not have before. They also have 13.5 to 22.5% chance for bolts to cast twice, which is really good that's what you want for this particular build, because you want them to cast multiple times. It also has +2 to pyromancy skills, which of course is going to help your firebolt, it's going to help your firewall, it's going to help pretty much anything that's a fire skill. Now, the meat and potatoes of this ability, this pair of gloves, comes down to the casting a firebolt through your firewall causes it to split into 3 bolts, dealing 93, so up to 30 to 100% increase to damage. And we're going to explore this effect in detail, but let's go ahead and talk about the flavor text real quick. Driven to surpass Asu, the wizard Naridon's reckless enchantments caused an inferno devastating the ancient town of Kagrim. Only the gauntlets remained, a solemn warning to all who dare tame fire. So the Flameweaver gauntlets allow you to do some really interesting things. When you first put them on and you fire off your firebolt, it's not going to look any different than pretty much any other firebolt that you've used before, which is fine. However, if you are getting the most out of this particular ability, you're going to notice that I'm trying to grab which one? Burning damage? Yeah, we probably want this one. When you use this with Firewall, what you're going to notice is that when you place your Firewall down and you cast through it, you're going to get 3. And if you double, you're going to get 6, which is going to allow you to stack your damage pretty high. Now, because this is a basic skill, you can do some very interesting things with this. Like, first off, you could potentially use Shard of Erethiel, which is going to increase the damage of your basic skill rather dramatically, up to 200% times. You can also utilize the aspect of the Moonrise, which is going to give you a really nice damage bump for your basic skills and also increase your attack speed. The aspect of adaptability, which is also going to increase your basic skill damage. And in general, you can really stack up the basic skill damage on Firebolt to the point of incredulousness. You probably do not, however, want to utilize the Pain and Gorger gauntlets because the Pain Gorger gauntlets do not accurately reflect the burn damage, which is the primary damage type of Firebolt. So that when it says that it reflects the damage to the enemies nearby, it's referring to the direct damage, it's not referring to the burn damage. And if you take a look at Firebolt specifically, it does say that it does hurl a flaming bolt, dealing 7,721% damage, and burning for 52% damage. So the majority of the damage is actually in the burn for Firebolt, not in the actual direct damage. And so Pain Gorgers doesn't really accurately reflect that. So it's interesting. So if you were thinking of building a build without Flameweavers and you wanted to throw Pain Gorgers on as an example, it doesn't really work very well with attacks that burn or bleed or do poison effects because it doesn't reflect the damage properly. So this is a much more interesting way to multiply the damage, because instead of trying to reflect the damage to another target, it is actually causing that damage to be multiplied by multiplying the number of bolts. Now, another very interesting thing about Firewall is that, well, it's obviously something that you can place, and wherever you want to place it is going to determine the spread of the ability. For instance, using the training dummies as an example, let's say I wanted to shotgun this particular target right here and not hit anyone else. I would put the Firewall directly in front of him, fire the Firebolt directly into his face, and it would split directly on that target, dishing out massive amounts of damage to that one target. However, if I also wanted to dish out more AoE damage and hit the entire group of monsters, you can very strategically put it closer to yourself, causing the firebolts to be split and dish out more damage in an AoE pattern, which is really nice. On top of this, Firebolt also has the ability to pierce through targets that are already burning. So as long as the target is burning, you will get a piercing effect and causing the Firebolt to go through the burning enemies and hit the targets behind. Now the first time you hit a target with Firebolt, it's not going to go through them. But the second time, as long as they're burning, it will go through them and hit the target behind, and it will go through every target that is burning, as many targets as there are. Which means that if I have a firewall right here and start firing the effect, you'll see that pretty much everything on the field of battle is getting hit because the fire bolts are piercing every single target. When I played this build back in Season 4, I did not have access to the Shard of Erethiel, so I was unable to really beef it up further than that. But I did have obviously the double attacks on the weapons, and I also was using the Flameweaver gauntlets. It did not have the double attacks at the time or the firewall size, but they were still very effective.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
As a basic build, it ends up being a burning build. So it's very important to note that the same way I noted that the Pain Gorgers don't work with Firebolt because of the burning effect. Firebolt is primarily a burning attack, not a direct damage attack, although it does have a little bit of a direct damage effect. And on top of that, Firewall is literally only a burning effect and has no direct damage whatsoever. So this is going to indicate that you're going to basically be using Firebolt and Firewall, which is more of a combustion than it is a Asus Ferocity. And the reason for this is because you're going to be stacking as much fire damage or burn damage as you possibly can. Now, an interesting way that you could tie this together with Fireball is that Fireball does have a Fireball deals 10% of burn damage you've applied to enemies as additional damage. So while you're stacking as much burn damage as you possibly can on the target through Firebolt and Firewall, you can potentially cause that firebolt damage to get solidified by using an occasional fireball to basically take that damage and actually cause it to do something more than what fireball would normally do in that situation. Scaling your combustion damage, essentially your burning damage, with a direct damage affix. And we can do something similar. So let me actually play around with this real quick. We have one more. So it would probably look something like this. You would cast your firewalls, you would stack up your burning damage as much as you possibly could. Once you get your burning damage stacked up, you would shoot a fireball, which would of course take that burning damage and would basically cause it to replicate on the targets around it for 10% of the total amount of burn. Now, when I did it back in Season 4 with the Flameweavers, I was able to get my burn damage up to millions and millions of burn damage per second. It was definitely a very powerful build. But nowadays, I could imagine it's probably going to be even higher with the Shard of Erethiel. Now, the thing about the Shard of Erethiel, though, is it's going to make your basic skill cost resource, and you're going to have to cancel that out in some way. Maybe utilizing, for instance, a Ring of the Starless Skies. The Starlight aspect could be very interesting. You could also utilize the regeneration from the Conjurations through the Conjuration Mastery, which is not a bad one there. And there's definitely a lot of ways to counter out that. One thing I would recommend to you guys, though, is if you do use the Shard of Erethiel to multiply the damage, you're probably going to need some sort of jump starter, because if you do run out, there might be a situation where you're just kind of standing there like an idiot for a little while, unable to do anything because you're completely out of mana. Now, the Sorceress is one of the few that actually has an innate regeneration, like no matter what, so she might not have as much of an issue with this as other characters, like the Barbarian that has an innate degeneration, which tend to causes him an issue when using the Shard of Erethiel, unless you have some way to counter that innate degeneration. I think that's pretty much it for this particular item. If you're trying to find yourself a pair of Flameweavers to try and set up the Firebolt build, if you check on Diablo 4.life in the unique target farming tools, you can go to the Flameweavers, the Weavers of the Flame, and you'll find that the Flameweavers tend to drop from Grigore. So if you're farming Grigore, you're going to be able to get some pretty good Flameweavers from him. I think that's pretty much it with these. They are one of my favorite unique items in the game so far. I think out of all of the unique items that I've covered from the very beginning, I do feel like this one is one of the most interactive and interesting as far as the unique items go. It's just one of those items that just has a lot of moxie. Man, this is just crazy. Like I just looked over and I got like these giant glowing orbs on the screen. It's just it's so ridiculous. I don't even know what's going on right now. I guess I'm just gonna have to like block up the windows with with blackout curtains or something. Anyway, as I was saying, I do believe that this is one of the most interactive and really fun uniques to use in the game. It requires a little bit of thinking, strategizing on where you're going to place your firewall, and utilizing your firewall to either A, shotgun targets, B, use like big gigantic AoEs where you can hit the entire screen, stacking burn damage to the moon and back, and trying to get as many burn effects as you can on the target to stack the combustion passive. It definitely worked really, really well in Season 4, and it's probably really good in Season 5 too. There's just so many fun builds to play though. And in Season 6 we're all going to be Spiritborns, so anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me for these fun videos, even when my green screen is messing up and I get weird glowing orbs on the screen. Be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.